Hello, what's the crack? How you doing? I hope you're staying well. I'm back with another kind of Belfast bedtime lockdown book reading for you this evening. I'm going to be reading another chapter of my second memoir, part of the Paperboy trilogy of Paperboy, Breadboy, all grown up. And glad you could join me again this evening. And it's interesting. Well, as usual, it's just gone 9 o'clock here in Northern Ireland in Portstewart, and the weather has been lovely throughout lockdown, but it's got very cold today, and it's sort of appropriate because this is a Christmas chapter, so it may be May, but this is a sort of a Yuletide chapter. So this is a chapter from Breadboy. It's chapter 15, and it's called Santa Claus is Coming to Town. I'll say hello to people in a wee minute once it gets started. It's Christmas! Screamed Noddy Holder. It was a very familiar yell. My father's decision to unleash Slade's Merry Christmas Everybody at the Westie Disco officially announced the beginning of the Christmas season, even though it was only the end of November. It's Christmas! Echoed Titch McCracken with a manly stomp and an aggressive spit of additional chewing gum on the sticky dance floor. Anarchy in the UK, interrupted Philip Ferris with a revolutionary pogo and a clatter of chains. His English accent was getting better, but his pierced nose had a scab on it now. Why's up, wee lad? Your head's cut, so it is, said Heather Mateer dismissively from the middle of a circle of girls dancing around a hill of handbags. Heather remained steadfastly unconvinced of the musical merits of punk. All right, guys and gals, here's my hot pick for the Christmas #1, announced my da in the mid-Atlantic accent he always used when he was DJing. I listened intently because my father's predictions were usually very good. He always knew what would go to #1. He predicted correctly who would get elected, and he said the troubles would never end. With every fulfilled prophecy, my mother would remind me, your father's a very clever man, you know. It's the new 45 from Boney M. So it is. It's a little number called Mary's Boy Child, and it goes a little bit something like, he pressed the start button on the battered double decks, this. Mary's boy child, Jesus Christ, was born on Christmas Day, began Boney M, and man will live forevermore because of Christmas Day. See, you didn't think you were going to get a carol song tonight in the middle of a lockdown in May, and did you? Anyway, Boney M sparkled in stunning a cappella harmony. Boney M bollocks, huffed Philip Ferris as he departed the dance floor defiantly. He stormed into the tuck shop and, in an act of pure rebellion, bought a packet of sweetie cigarettes and a lemonade shandy. Every time I saw Philip Ferris, he seemed to be becoming more and more of a hard man. His own father had thrown him out of the Boys Brigade football team for refusing to take the safety pin out of his nose during matches. Meanwhile, the dance floor filled with practically every remaining member of the Westie. Of course, my big brother was another of the few who remained stubbornly seated, and he uttered just one word at any boy who was enjoying the Boney M song: fruit. In contrast, I was delighted to experience this unusual enthusiasm for a peace-loving hymn of such deep spirituality. People shouted, "Let everyone know there is hope for all to find peace," sang your man with the hair that danced funny. Mary's Boy Child became the biggest instant dance floor hit since Disco Duck. I prayed that this would be the beginning of the religious revival all the old born-again men on the Shankill had been hoping for. Maybe Boney M would be just the catalyst they had been praying for, and everyone was going to get saved in tents, like back in 18-something or other. I was convinced of the evangelistic potential of Boney M, but I was certain Uncle Samuel would not have allowed this song in the repertoire of the wee meetings in Dublin, because it mentioned Mary far too much, and she was a Roman Catholic. Christmas was a time for music. Every year, Uncle Henry organised a series of rehearsals for the Westy Disco Choir, and we prepared to sing our hearts out at the carol services in Ballygomartin Presbyterian Church. We did a respectable First Noel and an admirable Bleak Midwinter. We practiced very hard to get our Glorias the right length in Ding Dong Merrily and High, but unfortunately, the smokers always ran out of breath before we got anywhere close to Hosanna in Excelsis. By popular demand, we revived When a Child is Born every Christmas because the Presbyterian pensioners of the Upper Shankill loved our choral interpretation of Johnny Mathis. When the time came for our performances, we were joined on stage at the front of the church by a wooden sheep with a cotton wool coat and several preschool shepherds with snatters and tea towels held around their heads by snake belts. A tiny Tears doll from the Great Universal Club book was dressed up as the baby Jesus and placed in a manger with straw from my late gerbil's cage. I had to hold my tongue at the many theological errors contained within this nativity scene, and I knew that Uncle Samuel would have been horrified. Yet it wasn't often teenagers were interested in Jesus, so I decided to hold my theological counsel. After one of our triumphant performances, as I stroked the coat of the wooden animal, the Reverend Lowe said I was making love to the sheep. I was shocked at this remark because it sounded like a man of the cloth was accusing me of doing something disgusting from one of my big brother's dirty rugby songs. If the lead up to Christmas was an important time of the year for music and religion, it was an even more critical period for bread. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So in the meantime, I'll just say hello. Hello there, Lynn and Evelyn and Sadie. Kenneth, all regulars. Hi, Kenneth Glenville. Hi, Maureen. Good evening, Susan Wilgar. I hope you're doing well. Glad you made it, Kenneth. Hi, Evelyn Brown. Hi, Jim Poole. And hello, Anne Riding. Hi, David and Maureen and Paul Grudgings, an old BRA boy. Hi, Norma Fleming and David Irwin. And just you hold on there now, David. There's going to be a bit more about tonics mallows because it is a Christmas chapter. We can't have Christmas in the Armo Bread Van without the tonics mallows. So that's coming up. Hello, another regular, Alan McLean. Hope you're well, Alan. Loved those pictures last night at the NME with Blondie on the front. Couldn't believe that you were able to put those to hand so quickly. Hi, Damien in Edinburgh. Hope you're all doing well there. Hi, Rachel. Hope you're doing well. And Luther and Nigel. Hello, Michael McKinley Sr. and Karen Shaya. Hope you enjoy this one as well. Thanks, Karen. Hi, Bernadette Saunders and Yitzhak and Francis. Here's a few more. Let me see who else is here. Mark McCauley. Good to have you again, Mark and Amy Nolan in the States. Hello, Fiona Hawkins, a BRA old girl. You might recognize some of these characters, I'm sure, Fiona. Connor O'Neill says, I would listen to, but I'm too far behind and have yet to read the book. Okay, fair enough. Connor, hats off for the contribution to mental health. We need artists accepted now more than ever. Thank you, Connor. That's the whole idea. Brilliant. Hi, Rosaline Hartley. Hope you're enjoying it and you're getting a bit of a break from all the brilliant work you're doing. And evening to Angela and Keith, the Montgomerys, and Neve Sahafian. Good to see you as well. So I'll continue with the story of being a bread boy in the Upper Shankill in 1978 at Christmas time. From the end of November, our customers began to place additional orders to ensure they had adequate bread, cakes and pastries for the Christmas season. Many of our customers requested a dozen mince pies every single Saturday in December. In spite of this great demand, I was not a fan of the mince pie. To me, they were simply flies' graveyards with sides. This felt familiar to not liking Elvis, but I understood I had to keep my personal tastes separate from my professional responsibilities, and so I took every order for mince pies with all the enthusiasm of an elf receiving a letter for Santa. Another typical seasonal order was a slightly stale unsliced plain loaf for making stuffing. It was strange how Christmas reversed my customers' expectations of the plain loaf. For the rest of the year, its level of freshness determined its quality. But in December, it was more desirable if it was slightly stale. But by far, here it's coming, David Irwin, by far the most popular Christmas order in the mini shop was a big box of Tunnock's tea cakes. We sold these mouth-watering mallows individually and in boxes of 6 all year round. But at Christmas time, everyone bought boxes of 36 to give as Christmas presents to friends and relatives. They easily outsold mince pies in the Ormo mini shop. Each of these delicacies was wrapped in red and silver striped foil that made them look very Christmassy. If you hung a Tunnock's tea cake on your Christmas tree, no one would even notice it wasn't a proper shiny bauble, unless you put it too close to the fairy lights and the chocolate melted and it ruined the tinsel garlands and your mother sent you to your room for being as thick as champ. On the first Saturday morning in December, there were snowflakes falling as we made our initial seasonal deliveries in the darkness. In fact, snow was universal over the Shankill, so it was. The freezing temperatures and the drifting snowflakes urged my customers into full Christmas preparation mode. Leslie arrived outside our house earlier than usual, seconds after my amazing snow-white plastic radio alarm clock had gone off and had interrupted a warm and comforting dream involving Debbie Harry and a bubble bath. The downtown radio news reported the roads being blocked by snow instead of barricades. Leslie had been monitoring the weather forecast overnight, and he decided to leave an hour earlier than usual to ensure that neither ice nor snow would come between Ormo and its customers. He was sporting a woolly hat like Benny in Crossroads to keep his ears and baldy head warm. Leslie was also wearing Wellington boots and a very determined look on his face. No one could look as determined as an orange man. Leslie regarded inclement weather as a personal challenge to his professionalism. I realised that nothing short of burial in a snowdrift would prevent him from completing the traditional route of his bread round that morning. The mini shop was very good in snow because it had so many tyres to get a grip. This was in contrast to our Ford Escort Respray, which slid down the icy roads like Bambi on a frozen lake. Leslie sprinkled salt on the mini shop steps to stop them freezing over and to avert customer falls. And then we set off on our Arctic adventure. I was wearing my duffel coat and my grammar school scarf wrapped around my neck and mouth up to my nostrils. I breathed warm air from my lungs into the scarf, but my breath turned damp and froze on the wool. I wore my Dr. Martens to stop me from slipping because my mother insisted that if I didn't wear proper boots in the snow, I would slip on the ice and fall into a hedge and put my eye out. In spite of the danger, I managed to have a few surreptitious slides down some of the hilly streets just for that crack. When Leslie sent me forth with an armful of loaves, I imagined I was Captain Scott from my history book, bravely leaving the safety of the mini shop to go out and deliver potato farls, knowing that wolves or polar bears might eat me. With every delivery, I wanted to say to Leslie, I may be some time, in a posh English accent. The first customer of the day was Mrs. Grant, who ordered a Yule log to cheer up her Richard with its throat and all. A Yule log was an oversized Swiss roll with a sprig of plastic holly on top that you weren't supposed to try to eat. Nobody explained this to Titch McCracken, and he nearly ended up in the Royal. Mrs. Grant shouted this order from her front door because she dared not tackle the ice hazards from her front step and the mini shop. At this point, I realised my skill and courage were going to be hazardous of mornings. Mr. Black was even more awkward than usual, and I had to run in and out of the van 3 times to meet his demands for Christmas confectionery. Even his yappy greyhounds didn't want to come out in the snow. I was sure Mr. Black was doing this on purpose, just to make me work harder. I had to calm my temper by reminding myself that this was the season of peace and goodwill to all men. even carnapsia-style bastards like Mr. Black. When we came to Mrs. Dunn's house, I was surprised to see her arriving up the steps of the van, as usual, in her dressing gown. She had put two Stuart supermarket plastic bags over the top of her furry pink slippers and attached them with elastic bands. "Come here till I tell you, love," said Leslie. "The wee fella could have taken your order in the house this morning." This was true. Mrs. Dunn regularly invited a variety of service providers into her house in the mornings. "Och, sure, I'm not long home from the Christmas dinner dance at the chimney corner, love," she replied. Mrs. Dunn's makeup was smudged around the eyes, and I could smell perfume and alcohol. She wore a strand of tinsel from her Christmas tree around her neck. Mrs. Dunn was always the first person in our street to put up her Christmas tree, even though she had no children. She had invested in an impressive modern plastic tree from Woolworths in North Street, and her shiny baubles were the envy of all the women in our street. "Does your woman think she's opening a Santa's grotto like the Co-op?" asked Big Aggie resentfully. I felt protective of Mrs. Dunn, not least because she gave me a good Christmas tip. As she balanced her Tunnock's tea cakes on top of her plain loaves with one hand, she managed to produce a droopy sprig of mistletoe from her dressing gown pocket with the other hand. Both Leslie and I declined her offer of a Christmas kiss, although she hadn't actually offered to kiss Leslie. Then she retrieved a Christmas present from the other dressing gown pocket and handed it to me. "Thanks very much, Mrs. Dunn," I said delightedly. "Can I open it now?" "No, love, you keep it for Christmas Day," she advised. As soon as she left the mini shop, I ripped off the Christmas wrapping paper to reveal a bottle of Scooby-Doo bubble bath with Scooby's head as the lid. I was very happy with this unexpected present, but slightly concerned that Mrs. Dunn might be suggesting I needed a bath before delivering the bread on a Saturday morning rather than leaving it to Sunday night every week. I sniffed under my arms, but I could detect no unpleasant whiff emanating from under my duffel coat. I kept my precious gift behind the wheaten loaves on the bottom shelf at the back of the van for the rest of the morning. When I got home, I couldn't unscrew Scooby's head for ages because the bubble bath had frozen. As Leslie and I continued on our wintry trek on that cold December morn, other customers put in their orders for Christmas goodies. Miss Adams ordered a large Christmas cake full of dried fruit and whiskey, which came in a tartan tin. We could never afford to consume such an extravagant cake in our house at Christmas, so I assumed this was posh Yuletide food. "Season's greetings," called Miss Adams, waving from her front door with a proper wreath hanging from the knocker. When we reached the snow-covered peace line, it looked almost soft and attractive in a pure snowy white. Mrs. McAllister had ordered a dozen sweetie selection boxes for all her neighbours' children, and when I deposited the stocking-shaped gifts in the kitchen, her daughter in the wheelchair laughed and clapped her hands excitedly. Leslie allowed me to spend a few minutes with her every Saturday morning while he enjoyed a good gossip with Mrs. McAllister about the current security situation around the peace line. With great sensitivity, he explained to me that the wee dote in the wheelchair isn't the full shilling, so she's not. Eventually, I found out that the girl in the wheelchair was called Naomi, like a woman in the Bible. It seemed unfair to me that Naomi had to live in a house on the peace line where rioters tried to break her bedroom window to bring a united Ireland. Everyone said it was terrible about poor Naomi, so it was, and it was awful pity of the wee creator, so it was. But Naomi seemed happier and friendlier than most people. She always gave me a beautiful smile and a big hug, even though I'd forgotten to splash on extra denim. I brought Naomi a free can of Coke every Saturday morning, and Mrs. McAllister returned my generosity with a good tip. I sometimes wish there were more people like Naomi who got excited at lollipops and dogs and cream buns and who didn't care about Protestants and Catholics. One Saturday morning, Mrs. McAllister asked me if we sold toilet roll in the Ormo mini shop. Not fully concentrating on automatic pilot, I answered her inquiry with the question, pan or plane? Mrs. McAllister laughed so hard that she began to cry, and Naomi pointed and laughed too. When she'd composed herself, Mrs. McAllister called me a grand wee fella and gave me an extra tip, although she was kind enough not to share my error with anyone else. But unfortunately, Leslie had overheard the conversation, and he retold the incident with glee to any other customer who would listen for the next year. By the time we arrived in the estate, the snow had deepened, and apart from army Saracens, the mini shop was the only moving vehicle remaining on the road. This proved that we were almost as essential as soldiers. The estate always looked much better at Christmas, with a touch of sparkle and flashing lights in every window, and a covering of pure white snow over the neglected grey pavements. There was a reassuring smell of coal smoke from the chimneys hanging heavily in the air. This pleasant Christmas card scene was ruined only by the tattered remains of the flags that had been flying on every lamppost since the 12th of July. The paramilitaries didn't allow any flags to be taken down ever, even when the Union Jacks became so dirty and bedraggled that the Queen Mother herself would have been affronted. "No one touches them flags," dictated Big Duff. This made no sense to me. I couldn't understand why the men who said they wanted to be British the most enforced shredded Union Jacks flying over their streets at Christmas. You had to wait for the weather to take down the flags each year. The wind could not be accused of being an IRA sympathiser, and the rain could never be burnt out of the estate. As we struggled along the icy streets, I noticed there was an unusually big security presence in the estate that morning. "Looks like there's a situation," said Leslie. When we arrived at the Rossbottoms, only Mr. Rossbottom attempted to make the hazardous journey from their front door to the Ormo mini shop. In his huge dressing gown, he looked like a great walrus trudging over a frozen lake in Greenland in a David Attenborough documentary. When he clambered on board, and once the van had regained its equilibrium, Mr. Rossbottom doubled his order of everything from now until Christmas. Their bread order was now so expansive that I wondered if I should ask to borrow my father's wheelbarrow, which he had borrowed from the foundry, to carry the whole load for the next weeks. "I think there's a situation," said Mr. Rossbottom, pointing out the back window towards a dozen RUC Land Rovers and army vehicles which were surrounding a bricked-up house at the end of the street. Just then, Mrs. Duff arrived in the van, looking very animated in Wellington boots and a heavy woolen Union Jack cardigan. "I've heard there's a situation," said Leslie, hoping for inside information. "Yes, there's a situation, so there is," confirmed Mrs. Big Duff with some authority. "There was an attempted attack on certain individuals by a certain organisation." "Where are they now?" asked Leslie. There, said Mrs. Big Duff, inexplicably pointing towards one of the flats. I assumed this meant the UDA and the UVF were fighting amongst themselves again. I could never understand why the two Protestant paramilitary groups were always feuding, because I couldn't see any difference between them. To me, they were as indistinguishable as stork margarine and butter on a Belfast bap. Mrs. Big Duff ordered 3 additional pan loaves to make extra sandwiches for Big Duff. She said that her Big Duff had to do so much overtime commanding operations from the drinking club during the Christmas party season that he didn't have time to get home for dinner. I tried to imagine what a paramilitary Christmas party would look like. I was certain the UDA were far too hard to pull Christmas crackers and read silly jokes. I was sure the UVF would never play charades, and I'd never seen a paper balaclava, even an orange one. But then I remembered reading in my history book about the truce at the battlefront on Christmas Day during the First World War. It happened in a place called No Man's Land, which sounded like the part of the Springfield Road between the security gates at Spring Martin. I wondered if perhaps this Christmas Day the IRA and the UDA would meet there on the peace line and share cigarettes and cans of harp for a few hours before going back to killing each other on Boxing Day. a Provo, wiping snowflakes off their photomathingamy glasses and shaking hands. As I imagined Johnny Mathis sitting on top of a snowy peace wall singing When a Child is Born, my peace-loving reverie was interrupted by the sound of Mrs. Big Duff's voice as she left the mini shop. All I know is them's involved in non-carry-on over yonder need to watch themselves, she said, and marched determinedly towards her front garden, where her small children were building a snowman with a carrot for a nose and pieces of coal for eyes. The snowman was also sporting a Milky Bar Kid gun and holster and was carrying an Ulster flag on the end of a broom handle. As we continued with our deliveries in the estate, Leslie explained to every customer that there was a situation and added with a wink that certain organisations were involved and the RUC were digging for footprints in the garden in the snow. I still had no idea that the situation was all about, but it certainly got everyone very excited and in the mood for Christmas. The only person who seemed disinterested in the situation was Billy Cooper's granny with the curlers. Come here till I tell you, said Leslie. Have you heard about the situation and the carry-on with the organisations in the estate this morning? A pan, a plane, 2 soda and 2 potato, replied Billy Cooper's granny. As we finished the bread round, Leslie gave me an extra 50p, a packet of potato, cheese and onion crisps and a can of totally tropical lilt, as a token of his appreciation for my additional labours in the snow. However, just as I was about to leap down the steps of the van to help my wee brother to dig his space hopper out of the snow, Leslie asked me an unexpected question. Will you be Santa's little helper with me next week? He asked. What? I replied. I'm doing Santa next Saturday afternoon for the Sunday school party up in the estate, explained Leslie. The rag and bone man is lending me his horse and cart, and I need an elf to help me give out the presents. I stumbled. I got a big enough slagging from my big brother for being a Breadboy, and I knew that he would have a field day if I agreed to be Leslie's little helper on the back of a sleigh in the estate. Sure, it's for the kids in your wee Sunday school class, added Leslie, recognising that I was going to require some persuasion. Do I have to dress up? I asked. Come here till I tell you, young lad, he said. Not if you don't want to. Sure, as long as I'm dressed as Santa, nobody will be looking next or near you. A short silence ensued, wherein I was expected to say yes. Aye, all right, I agreed, even though I didn't want to do it. As I paced towards the front door of our house, Mr. Oliver's hedge rooster, now highlighted by silver frost, had lost its definition and needed clipped back into shape. So I'm going to continue in a wee minute to tell you what happened when Leslie McGregor was Santa in the estate. But before I do that, I'll say hello to some more people. So who else is there? Alan McLean. Oh, you'll keep the enemy for me? I would love that, Alan. that edition that's in the book. Hello, Brenda McMeekin. I enjoy every night. I keep them for my bedtime stories. Just love it all, being able to relate. Glad you're enjoying it, Brenda. Hello, Anne Kirk. I'm glad you're enjoying the storytelling. Hi, Marlene Williamson. Norma Fleming. I'm going to add Tunnocks cakes to my click and collect order. See, I should be sponsored by Tunnocks Mallows. I'm getting them orders. Hello, Alex and Stuart and Jeremy and Thomas. Davy Calder, still listening every night in North Belfast. Good to hear it, Davy. I'm sure you recognise all the places I'm talking about. Hi, Richard and the lovely Leslie from up the country who's down the stairs. Hi, Neil Vance, and Nave says, hate talking about Christmas in the summertime. Comes around quick enough as it is. I know, we'll be selling selection boxes next. Hi, Stephanie, and yeah, let's hope Christmas isn't cancelled, says Susan. Oh my goodness. And Mike Moran, hi to you as well. Okay, so this is what happened next. When the dreaded day came, I decided not to turn up. This was a big decision for me, as I was renowned throughout the Upper Shankill for my reliability. I tried to think of an excuse like being sick, but when my mother found me in the bathroom, sticking my fingers down my throat and retching, she immediately recognised what I was up to and insisted I run over to the estate immediately and carry out my elf duties as I had promised. I can't believe you have left that big crater to do Santa all on his own in that there estate, she said, making me feel instantly guilty. He's awful good to them wee children, you know. But, Mommy, I don't want to be squandered, I protested. Stop your own nonsense, she said, and get yourself over there to Santa right now, she insisted. I reluctantly trudged over to the estate. Within 10 minutes, I spotted Santa in the snow. In the distance, at the top of the hill, I could see the outline of Father Christmas on the back of the rag and bone cart, with tinsel round the sides, being pulled by an old horse with a red nose attached. At first it seemed to be a joyous scene of happy children skipping along beside Santa and singing sweet carols. As I made my way up the slippy footpath, I could recognise the faces of some of my Sunday school class, and I could hear the sound of children singing. But what was the tune? Thankfully, it wasn't an abuse of Climb, Climb Up Sunshine Mountain, but it wasn't Jingle Bells either. As I arrived into earshot, I could hear the children joining together in harmony and singing, Leslie McGregor's bread sticks to your belly like lead. Leslie McGregor's bread sticks to your belly like lead. As if this wasn't disturbing enough, I then noticed the scene surrounding Santa Claus was more like a riot than a celebration. As I drew closer, I could hear Leslie shouting, if one more of you wee Comanches do that again, there'll be nothing but cinders for yous all this Christmas, so there won't. I spotted the McLarnon twins from my Sunday school class and several other fans of Climb, Climb Up Sunshine Mountain. These rebellious choristers now began singing a Christmas ditty of their own, which they certainly had not learnt at Sunday school. Jingle bells, Santa smells a million miles away. He done a fart behind the cart and blew up the IRA. It was only when I got within a few feet of Rudolph that I noticed what else was happening. The Sunday school was stoning Santa. I was shocked to notice two of the younger girls with pigtails from my Sunday school class joining in the attack enthusiastically. Girls, I intervened. Don't you know who brings you presents every Christmas morning? Jesus, they replied in unison, obviously thinking it was a Sunday school question. My attempts to bring peace and goodwill were shattered when Santa was hit on the nose by a snowball with a large piece of coal inside. Come here till I tell you, young McLarnon, shouted Santa. If I tell your dad about this, you'll get the hiding of your life. I wrestled with what I should do to save Santa from this contemptible onslaught. I was also aware that if Santa was a target, then an elf could also be attacked. Leslie had not yet spotted me among the riotous crowd, so I made a principled decision. If Santa was being stoned and I was supposed to be his little helper, there was only one thing I could do. I ran away. As I scarpered, I could hear the sound of Santa calling my Sunday school class a bunch of ungrateful wee glipes, but I did not turn back. When I arrived back at the house, my father was lying on the kitchen floor, fixing a leak in the washing machine. Those children over there are wee hellions, Daddy, I said. My father sat up and set down the monkey wrench he had borrowed from the foundry. You remember this, son, he said. You're better than no one, and no one is better than you. This sounded like something Jesus would have said. As he returned to the tubes under the washing machine, I felt guilty for condemning my own Sunday school class. My father was very Christian for an atheist. He was a very clever man, you know. I felt guilty for the rest of the day. I even lost my excitement that ABBA was going to be on the Mike Yarwood Christmas special. I didn't get up on the sticky dance floor with all the others and boogie to Wizard at the Westie Disco that night, even though I too wished it could be Christmas every day. I tried to amuse myself by making a Christmassy thing they had shown on Blue Peter. I borrowed a couple of coat hangers from my mother's wardrobe, stuck them together with sticky back plastic and covered them in tinsel. It was only as I attempted to add some of the candles we had used to light the house during the Ulster workers' strike that my mother confiscated the whole shiny creation and accused me of building a fire hazard. She had been very highly strung ever since Mr. Oliver had died in her arms, and Auntie Emma was always asking her about her nerves. The following Saturday morning, I had to listen to Leslie describing the whole Santa assault in detail to every outraged customer. I felt even guiltier when he added, and the young fella here couldn't even help me because he was in bed with a migraine. My lie was spread throughout the upper shankle like runny margarine on a hot Ormeau pancake. I would never admit to my cowardice for fear of losing my job, so I asked God to forgive me and prayed extra hard for my Sunday school class to get saved before next Christmas. As I was leaving the mini shop after our final Christmas delivery, Leslie wished me a Merry Christmas and gave me a big box of Tunnocks Mallows. I gave the whole box to my granny as penance for letting down Leslie and Santa and Jesus and my father all on the one day. I genuinely didn't want to be a selfish wee bastard, so I didn't. All I ever wanted was to do the right thing. So there you are. That's a Christmassy chapter, chapter 15 of Breadboy. Hope you enjoyed all that. And Nigel McComb says, no one says situation in Australia. Oh, there's always a situation here, Nigel. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Michael. Better and better, he says. Brilliant, Tony. Thanks again, says Evelyn. Lovely to have you all joining me. I'll be back tomorrow evening, same time, where we'll continue on chapter 16 of Breadboy. Until then, stay home, stay well, and stay positive.